The first time I saw my boss cry, the whole office was full of sunlight, but somehow it felt like the darkest room in the world. She was standing behind the glass wall of her cabin, one hand pressed against her mouth, the other holding a file like it was the only thing keeping her from falling apart. Everyone in the company knew Marceline Voss as the woman who never broke, never raised her voice, never arrived late, never asked for help, and never let anyone see the weight she carried. But that morning, with the city shining outside and the hum of computers filling the floor, I saw something no one else noticed. I saw her wipe away a tear before turning back into the powerful woman everyone feared, and I had no idea that one careless joke from me would change both our lives forever. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet people who care when no one else does, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Lifeline Diaries. Sometimes the smallest moment of compassion becomes the beginning of a story someone desperately needed. My name is Orin, and I was never the kind of man people noticed first. I worked in the operations department of a mid-sized logistics company called Vera North, where deadlines were sharp, mistakes were expensive, and silence was often safer than honesty. I was 32, unmarried, and still carrying the disappointment of a life that had not gone according to plan. My father had passed away when I was young, my mother's illness had taken most of my savings, and by the time I reached adulthood, I had learned to survive by staying useful, staying quiet, and never expecting anyone to come rescue me. Work was not my dream. It was my shelter. It gave me a desk, a routine, and a reason to keep moving through days that often felt too heavy. Marceline Voss was the CEO, though everyone simply called her Ms. Voss. She was elegant in a distant way, always dressed in calm colors, always walking with purpose, always carrying herself like softness was a luxury she could not afford. People whispered about her behind her back. Some called her cold. Some said she had no heart. Some said she only cared about profit. But I had watched her more carefully than most. I had seen her stay late to fix payroll issues so employees would be paid on time. I had seen her quietly approve medical leave for workers who had already used their benefits. I had seen her leave handwritten notes on desks after someone completed a difficult project. She was not heartless. She was guarded. And I understood guarded people because I was one of them. The day everything changed began like any other bright weekday. Sunlight poured through the office windows, turning the polished floor golden. Phones rang, printers coughed, and people moved from desk to desk with coffee cups and tired faces. I had been asked to bring a revised shipment report to Ms. Voss' cabin after a client meeting went badly. When I reached her door, I heard voices inside. One belonged to her, controlled but strained. The other belonged to a man I later learned was her older brother, Calder, a board member who treated her company like his inheritance and her heart like a weakness. His words were low but cruel enough to pass through the glass. He accused her of being selfish, of ruining the family name, of choosing work because no one would ever choose her. Then he walked out past me without even looking in my direction. When I stepped inside, Marceline had already turned toward the window. Her shoulders were stiff, but her fingers trembled against the edge of the desk. I placed the report down quietly and pretended not to notice the tear shining on her cheek. She thanked me in that professional voice of hers, but it cracked on the last word. I should have left. Any sensible employee would have left. Instead, maybe because I knew what loneliness looked like when it tried to wear expensive clothes, I stayed 1 second too long. That I tried to lighten the moment with a small, foolish joke. I said maybe she should let someone care for her once in a while, because even bosses were allowed to be human. I expected her to dismiss me. I expected a cold stare, maybe a reminder about professional boundaries. But she looked at me with eyes so tired they seemed older than her face, and she said she had been hoping I would. The silence after that was so deep I could hear the air conditioner humming above us. My breath caught, and for a moment I wondered if I had misunderstood. But Marceline did not look away. She stood there in the morning light, not as my boss, not as the woman everyone feared, but as someone who had finally run out of strength and accidentally told the truth. I did not know what to say, so I said the only honest thing I could. I told her she did not have to explain anything. She nodded once, then lowered herself into her chair like her legs had forgotten how to hold her. That moment did not become romance overnight. Real life is not that simple, and broken people do not heal because of one soft sentence. For days afterward, we returned to our roles. She signed documents, led meetings, corrected budgets, and made impossible decisions. I filed reports, managed schedules, handled vendor issues, and pretended my heart did not beat faster whenever she passed my desk. But something had shifted between us. She began asking me to stay after meetings to review details. She asked my opinion on employee concerns. She trusted me with small things first, then harder things. And in quiet moments, when sunlight stretched across her office floor, she would sometimes speak to me not like an employee, but like a person standing beside her in a storm. That I learned that her mother had died 2 years earlier, leaving behind debts, family conflict, and a house full of memories no one wanted except Marceline. I learned her father had been emotionally absent, her brother bitter, and her success had made her more isolated instead of more loved. She had built Vera from a failing family business into something strong, but every victory had cost her another piece of peace. Men admired her power but feared her discipline. Friends disappeared when she stopped being useful. Family came close only when they needed money. She had spent years being needed by everyone and known by almost no one. That I did not try to fix her. I brought her tea when she forgot lunch. I reminded her of meetings without making her feel foolish. I noticed when she had not slept. I once left a small packet of pain relievers and a banana on her desk because she had rubbed her temple for 3 hours and ignored her assistant's reminders to eat. She found me later near the archive room and gave me the kind of smile that barely moved her lips but reached her eyes. For Marceline, that smile was almost a confession, but the closer we became, the more dangerous it felt. People notice warmth in places where they expect ice. Rumors began like dust in sunlight, small but impossible to ignore. Someone saw us talking in the courtyard during lunch. Someone noticed she approved my proposal before others. Someone said I was climbing the company ladder by standing too close to the boss. I heard the whispers before she did, or maybe she heard them and chose silence because silence had protected her for years. I considered asking for a transfer, not because I wanted distance, but because I did not want to become another reason people hurt her. One afternoon, under a pale blue sky, I found her sitting alone on the rooftop terrace after a board meeting. The city moved below us, loud and bright, but she looked strangely still. She told me Calder was pushing to remove her as CEO. He had gathered investors, twisted old numbers, and painted her as unstable. The company she had saved was now being used against her. She said it calmly, but I could see the fear in the way her hand tightened around her coffee cup. Not fear of losing power. Fear of losing the only thing she had built with her own hands. That I wanted to promise everything would be fine, but empty comfort can feel like an insult. So I sat beside her and told her the truth. I told her she had spent years carrying people who were waiting for her to collapse, but she was not alone anymore. She looked at me then, and in the daylight her face seemed softer, almost younger. She asked why I cared so much. I could have hidden behind loyalty, respect, or friendship. Instead, I told her because somewhere along the way, caring for her had stopped feeling like kindness and started feeling like breathing. For the first time since I had known her, Marceline cried without turning away. The battle for the company lasted 3 weeks. Those weeks tested everything in us. Calder leaked internal emails to make her look reckless. A senior manager betrayed her by handing over private planning documents. Investors demanded explanations. Staff members grew anxious. Every morning, Marceline entered the office with her head high, and every afternoon I watched the sunlight reveal the exhaustion beneath her makeup. I helped gather records, organize timelines, recover missing approvals, and prepare evidence showing that Calder had manipulated financial reports for his own benefit. It was not glamorous. It was long hours, aching eyes, cold lunches, and quiet determination. But slowly, the truth began to rise. Then came the day of the final board review. It happened in the largest conference room, with glass walls and a long table that reflected every nervous face. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright enough to make the room glow. Calder arrived confident, wearing a gray suit and a smile sharp enough to cut. Marceline sat at the head of the table, calm on the outside, but I could see her fingers resting against her notebook, pressing lightly as if grounding herself. I stood near the presentation screen, not as a hero, not as a savior, but as someone who had promised not to let her stand alone. The evidence was undeniable. Payment trails. Altered reports. Private messages. Testimony from 2 employees Calder had pressured. By the time the review ended, his confidence had drained from his face. The board voted to keep Marceline as CEO and open a legal investigation into Calder's conduct. No one cheered. Real victories are often quiet. Marceline simply closed her eyes for 1 second, and when she opened them, she looked at me across the room with gratitude so raw it almost hurt to receive. Afterward, she walked into the courtyard behind the office where sunlight filtered through young maple trees. I followed at a respectful distance, unsure if she needed space or support. She stopped near a bench and turned to me. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. She said everyone had always wanted something from her, but I had given her something she forgot existed. Peace. I told her she had given me something too. She had made me feel that my quiet life, my small acts, my unnoticed heart, could still matter to someone. Months passed. We did not rush. Marceline changed some company policies to protect employee fairness, created a leadership team that did not depend on fear, and slowly allowed herself to become more human in front of others. She laughed more often. She took lunch outside. She remembered birthdays. People still respected her, but now they also trusted her. As for me, I stopped hiding behind usefulness. I began speaking up, leading projects, and believing that being gentle did not mean being weak. Our relationship grew carefully, respectfully, and honestly. There were boundaries to honor, decisions to make, and difficult conversations about work, power, and reputation. Eventually, I moved to a different department under separate leadership, not because love was shameful, but because we both wanted it to begin cleanly. The first time we held hands outside the office, it was on a bright Saturday morning at a small riverside cafe. The sun was warm, the street was alive with people, and Marceline laughed when I spilled sugar across the table. It was such a simple sound, but to me it felt like a locked room opening point. 1 year later, Veranorth held a charity event for families of employees facing medical hardship. It was Marceline's idea, though she refused to put her name on it. She stood on the stage in a cream-colored dress, sunlight spilling through the hall windows behind her, and spoke about how strength is not measured by how much pain we hide, but by how much love we allow ourselves to receive. I stood near the back, watching employees listen to her with tears in their eyes, and I remembered that morning when I first saw her cry alone behind glass. Near the end of the event, she found me by the donation table. She slipped her hand into mine where no one could see and whispered that I had once joked she should let someone care for her. Then she smiled and said it had been the best joke anyone ever made. I looked at her, this woman who had survived betrayal, loneliness, judgment, and the terrible burden of always being strong, and I realized love had not rescued her. Love had simply stood beside her until she remembered she was worth rescuing herself. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach people who may be silently waiting for hope, kindness, and a reminder that they are not alone. And before the ending, please comment this line: sometimes the strongest hearts are the ones waiting for someone gentle enough to notice they are tired. Years after that first morning, Marceline and I still remember the sunlight in her office, the trembling silence, and the sentence that changed everything. She often says I cared for her when she had forgotten how to ask. But the truth is, she cared for me too. She taught me that quiet people can become brave, that broken trust can be rebuilt, and that sometimes the person who seems impossible to reach is not cold at all. They are simply waiting for someone patient enough to knock softly. stay kindly, and prove that love does not always arrive loudly. Sometimes it walks in during an ordinary day, carrying a report, making a small joke, and offering care to a heart that has been strong for far too long.